Bernie Ecclestone is the man responsible for building Formula One into a global powerhouse viewed by millions across the globe. Despite being small in stature, he is responsible for the rise of the sport over the last 40 years through a series of major negotiations. One journalist has described his relationship with Formula One as Formula One is Bernie Ecclestone and Bernie Ecclestone is Formula One. Let's take a look at how he did it. Bernard Ecclestone was born in Suffolk, England in 1930 to trawler captain Sidney Ecclestone and his wife Bertha. Bernie had a poor upbringing and his parents were very careful with money, with his mother immediately making budgets once her husband had been paid. A young Bernie picked up on this, trading goods at school and bargaining with local soldiers to deliver messages to their girlfriends in exchange for chewing gum. It was here that Ecclestone first learnt to negotiate, something that he would become so formidable at in the future. At school, he never missed an opportunity to make money, whether it was delivering newspapers or picking vegetables for locals. After failing his exams, he was sent to Woolwich Polytechnic to study physics and chemistry. However, the sciences did not interest him in the slightest, but it was here he was introduced to motorbike racing at local race circuit Brands Hatch. This was the beginning of his motoring career. At the age of 16, Ecclestone left school and got a job at a local gas board. However, he spent much of his time at work looking for motorbikes that he could sell for a profit. Selling bikes soon became more profitable than his job, and he quit to sell them full-time. After working for a few second-hand motorcycle dealers, he struck a deal with his employer to rent part of his forecourt in return for a percentage of the profits. Ecclestone soon moved into racing at a converted RAF base that would soon become the legendary racetrack, Silverstone. He raced bikes mainly at Brands Hatch, but gave up after an accident which saw him land in the car park outside the racetrack. Ecclestone took a short break after the accident, investing in a number of properties while selling motorcycles on the side. He also bought neighbouring dealerships and refurbished them. At this point, Ecclestone started to make serious money, getting his suits tailored on Savile Row in London and taking his wife to Park Lane Hotel for dinners most weekends. A trip to Crockford's casino in Mayfair usually followed, where Ecclestone found himself gambling against famous personalities, including newspaper baron Lord Beaverbrook. Ecclestone soon became famous for his fearless gambling, becoming part of the wealthy establishment, often selling cars to the famous people of the day whilst having dinner with them. However, in 1973, Ecclestone had his first run-in with the law for avoiding paying taxes. This would not be his last offence. He returned to racing in 1957 as the manager of Stuart Lewis Evans and purchased 2 racing cars from the disbanded Connaught racing team. In 1972, he took the plunge and purchased racing team Brabham for £100,000. This moment proved pivotal and led to Ecclestone's control of the sport. He helped to form the Formula One Constructors Association with other influential figures in the sport, including Frank Williams, Max Mosley, and Colin Chapman. The Brabham team that Ecclestone owned achieved little in 1972, but the appointment of a young Gordon Murray, the man who later designed the iconic McLaren F1, gave the team a number of victories in the 1974-75 season. These successes saw Ecclestone sign racing legends Niki Lauda and Nelson Piquet to the team. As Piquet and Murray left to join McLaren, Ecclestone agreed to sell the team to a Swiss businessman for £5 million. From this point, Bernie became increasingly involved in the Formula One Constructors Association and began to see the potential of television rights that would cement Formula One's place for the long term. If he could control the broadcasting rights around the world, Ecclestone realised that he could make a lot of money. He became chief of the FOCA, with Max Mosley acting as his legal advisor. He met former driver Mosley in 1971 after they both attended meetings of the Grand Prix Constructors Association, where Ecclestone participated as an owner of Brabham and Mosley as a part owner of March team. Together, they negotiated a number of deals with the FIA, the governing body for F1, for television rights for a number of races. They also utilised their connections with racing drivers and team managers to make Formula One safer, and eventually created a company which saw Ecclestone manage the commercial rights to the sport. The terms of the deal saw 47% of the TV revenue split between the competing teams, 30% to the FIA, the sport's governing body, and 23% to Ecclestone's new company. Prior to this deal, the teams had owned the TV rights, and not everyone was happy, as Bernie Ecclestone had been appointed to give the teams a larger piece of the monetary pie and ended up receiving more than each team. While Ecclestone made a lot of money from the deal, he was also pivotal to increasing driver salaries by 5 times in the coming decade. Ecclestone did almost all the negotiations himself, and when a banker looked to float the business in the 1990s, he was surprised to find the company owned only one building and a few vehicles, despite being valued at £2.5 billion. At this point, Ecclestone was earning around £1 million a week from the venture. In 1999, he underwent heart surgery and a triple coronary bypass, but remained at the forefront of the sport, driving it to new heights. He became a billionaire in 2005 after selling a stake in the Formula One group for £2.5 billion through a company based overseas in Liechtenstein named Bambino Holdings, owned by his wife, meaning that they paid no taxes, which would have amounted to around £2 billion. Ecclestone was left with a minority stake in the sport, but when the majority shareholder went bust, a German bank named Bayer LB took control. They wanted Ecclestone out of the sport. He ended up bribing the head of the bank to stay in control, and he held the bank to ransom, holding the complex contracts and relationships that held the sport together. He would only share these secrets if F1 was sold to a party that would keep Ecclestone running the sport. Bayer sold the stake to CVC Capital Partners, and Ecclestone somehow received a commission of £63 million for helping to broker the deal. The deal remained secret for over 4 years until it was unearthed by a German journalist. The bribe would have almost certainly landed Ecclestone in prison, but he paid £100 million to avoid a 10-year sentence. However, the head of the bank received an 8-year sentence for his role. Ecclestone later claimed that he paid the bribe due to blackmail over his offshore holdings, despite being a key part of the deal. When Ecclestone divorced his then-wife Slavia Radic, a strange agreement was reached. Radic agreed to pay Ecclestone about £100 million from the trust per year, but the loss of his fortune is still a frustration. At the time, it was one of the biggest divorce settlements in UK history. A key to Ecclestone's success is the tight ship that he ran, with low costs and a focus on running a 5-star establishment to attract sponsors, alongside the major TV revenue. Rolex is a major sponsor of the sport, alongside brewer Heineken. Bernie did not focus on attracting younger audiences, as many are not rich enough to afford these luxuries. He also smartened up Formula One, ensuring teams wear uniforms, which has in turn attracted more sponsors to the sport, and made sure the races start on time so they could be televised. Prior to this, the races started when all the drivers decided to arrive at the circuit. He followed the sport using a grey mobile home known as the Bernie bus to commute to races around Europe. The bus acted as his headquarters where he held important meetings. However, as Ecclestone hunted for more money, the viewing figures have dropped as Formula One is no longer accessible on terrestrial TV. Those wanting to view the races have to pay extra to companies such as Sky to have the privilege of watching them live. Races have also become uncompetitive, as most of the profits flow to the richest teams in the sport, namely Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull, allowing them to dominate races. The changes in schedules and tracks have also seen fans resent Ecclestone, as cities and countries bid to hold Formula One races over more established tracks. The move to less well-known tracks was aimed to increase the appeal of the sport, especially in the Middle East and China. Ecclestone even admitted that it wouldn't bother him if he became a bad guy for taking the British Grand Prix away. Like many sports, Formula One has now become a billionaire's playground, with some of the world's wealthiest people currently owning teams. Current world champion Lewis Hamilton has highlighted this, with Lance Stroll, who owns Aston Martin, and Dietrich Mateschitz, who owns Red Bull, are pouring money into the sport and making it less accessible. In 2017, Ecclestone sold out to Liberty Media for £6.4 billion, ending his 40-year reign as the ruler of global motorsport. He remained as a chairman emeritus at the organisation and is still an advisor to the board. However, his expertise have not been called upon. Liberty is focusing on social media and digital screening to grow the sport and reach younger audiences who will hopefully develop into future fans. Bernie Ecclestone has developed Formula One from niche competition to global phenomenon after buying the Brabham racing team in 1971. Soon after, he became the secretary of the Constructors Association to bargain on behalf of the teams, building a multi-billion-dollar fortune in the process. Whether the seizing of control was opportunistic or just plain greed, his simple strategy of buy cheap, sell high, and keep costs down has helped Formula One become the sport it is today, attracting millions of viewers across the world. Ecclestone was one of the most powerful men in the sport, although his tax-avoiding strategies have tarnished his long-term legacy.